Mr. Vice President of the Coordination and Development Commission of the Northern Region, dear President of IAIA, dear President of APAI, dear Program Co-Chair, dear sponsors, dear guest speakers, dear friends. Let me start with a personal story. 30 years ago, I entered this impressive building for the very first time. The customs of Oporto were still here. There were big lorries with containers parked all around the place. I came here to look for a truck driver who would accept to drive me to Paris. I was successful and I managed to go until Irun, which is in the northern border between Spain and France, and then I kept hitchhiking until Paris. It is with emotion that I look around me and I see this process reversed. Alfândega, the customs house, is not a departure point anymore. Now it is a meeting point from people from the infinite corners of this only one earth. Thank you for coming to Porto. We are 931 delegates from 96 countries. Porto is the largest IAIA conference ever. Why? Maybe because we are in Europe, easily accessible from all over the world. Maybe because Porto has a special charm and an incredible urban scenario, a little far from the most traditional postcards. Well, I truly believe that the main reason for this success is the theme of this year's conference. Energy, future. Energy is the most crucial topic of our common future. What will future energy sources be? And how will the future be shaped by these new energy sources? What is our role? Better, what are our roles as impact assessment professionals to deal with this? Let me introduce you to Carlos Borrego. Carlos is the director of the Department of Environment and Planning at the University of Aveiro. We've been working together almost every day for the last 25 years. He is the co-chairman of IAIA12 Program Committee, and he will give you the welcome address.
Distinguished guests and guest speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure, in the name of the Institute of Environment and Development of the University of Aveiro, to extend my warm welcome to all of you in Porto, in the Alfândega Congress Center for the 32nd Annual Conference of the International Association for Impact Assessment. It is curious that the history of both this building and the conference are somehow connected. This old custom house building was constructed on the Miragaia beach on the north bank of the River Douro, on a former fisherman beach. Its construction dates back to the second half of the 19th century in response to the great growth in Porto, and was really shrouded in controversy. The impact of the custom house construction were far from peaceful. The building blocked the access of the population to the river and changed the patterns of the river flood areas, with direct impacts on the surrounding environment and riverside population. Most probably, the construction did not take into account the knowledge-action chain and the impact assessment. Most probably, the construction of this building would not be possible today due to the impacts. Despite this dispute, Porto has gained a remarkable building which is different from the characteristic architecture of the 15th century riverside buildings and is now the house of the Transport and Communication Museum and the venue for various social-cultural events, providing the city with an important cultural and multifunctional facility, which I hope you will use during these days. How can we tackle the environmental and social risks that will occur as a result of our quest for development, production, and management of existing and new energy sources? Our subject of the conference. How can impact assessment be used to promote sustainable development? In 1992, the regional Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro ignited the search for solutions for a sustainable planet. I had the honor to participate in this United Nations conference and the responsibility, together with other ministers, to sign the documents approved. 20 years later, the Rio Plus 20, the world has changed for sure. I will be there in June, but not signing whatever it is this time. However, I'm not distracted from the process. Economic power has shifted, corporate influence has grown, and political will has faded. There is a real need to take stock of what we have learned and to examine how this can be most usefully applied of two new contexts. We undertook this conference during a period of global volatility and uncertainty, and where economies are teetering, inequality is growing, and global temperatures continue to rise. We are testing the capacity of the planet to sustain us. Efforts to reach the Millennium Development Goals of United Nations and other social and economic targets are hampered by both the inability to agree on decisive and coordinated actions in national and in multilateral forums, and by unmet commitments for financial support. The signposts are clear. We need to change dramatically, beginning with how we think about our relationships to each other, to future generations, and to the ecosystem that supports us. With 7 billion of us now inhabiting our planet, it is time to reflect on our current path. Today, we stand at a crossroads. Continuing the same path will put people on our planet at greatly heightened risk. The other path, I believe, provides extraordinary opportunity, but we must be committed and courageous in following it. Changing course will not be easy. 20 years after Rio Earth Summit, the challenge and the opportunities of sustainable development are more relevant than ever. Today, we see with increasing clarity that economic growth, environmental protection, and social equity are one and the same agenda, the Sustainable Development Agenda. We cannot make lasting progress in one without progress on all. People are at the center of my vision of sustainable development. which is not, in my vision, is not a destination, but a dynamic process of adaptation, learning, and action. It is about recognizing, understanding, and acting on interconnections, above all, those between the economy, society, and natural environment. The world is not yet on this path. Progress has been made, but it has been neither fast nor deep enough, and the need for further reaching action is growing ever more urgent. In the year 2030, a child born this year will come of age. Our recommendations at the end of this conference should seek to establish for and for all children a world in which a sustainable, inclusive growth provides for less for all, more for less for all. Each of us must be a part of the solution. As a scientist, but also a manager, I hope we will find some answers to these questions and more new questions at the end of this conference, at least to justify the next conference. Thank you for your attention.
IAIA12 will be a very intense conference. There will be 440 presentations and 47 posters, all packed into 3.5 days. So get ready for an overflow of information. Browse carefully through the program and set objectives for your participation in IAIA12. And from my personal experience, avoid hop-on and hop-off sessions, otherwise you get lost in so many activities in the program. Let me introduce you now Bertilo Valadas. Bertilo Valadas is the president of APAI, the Portuguese affiliate of IAIA, and one of the partners of this organization. Bertilo.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. It is an enormous pleasure for myself to be here today to welcome you in the name of APAI, the Portuguese Association for Impact Assessment, here in Porto and here in Portugal. Let me begin for a short word about Portugal. As far as you know, we are an old country in Europe. We have by now almost 9 centuries of history. So we have a culture, we have tradition, we have history. I hope that you have the opportunity to involve with some activities that allow you to know Portuguese people better. We are well known by our respect to other cultures, by even by our innovation, and also by respect from human rights. I always like to remember that we were the first country in all the world that abolished death sentence. So we are proud of a lot of things in our story, and we like to, well, we are a sad people, but we are very kind and like to host entities, so I hope that we will like this conference in our organization. Let me say something about APAI, our professional organization. Well, We exist since 1995. We are an affiliate of IAIA since 2003. We have public utility. We are a public utility status recognition since last year. We are the only non-governmental organization in Portugal focused in impact assessment. We have 100 more or less of members. 1/3 are cooperative members. In our association, driving forces with professional status are represented. We have universities, consultants, promoters, public servants, so everybody that has a role in impact assessment is in our association. We are small, but very proactive, promoting reflection about the issues related with impact assessment. Let me say that in this moment, you know, that Portugal is suffering a crisis, everybody knows that. So, this means what? This means that economy is supposed to be the most important thing now, and we have social problems, and of course, environment is not a top priority at this moment. So, it is our responsibility as an association of the civil society to underline the importance of the environment and to underline the importance of the values of sustainability. So, we are very committed with these values. Next month in the edition of the World Summit in Rio de Janeiro, we have we subscribed the declaration of IAIA, telling that indeed impact assessment is a very important tool for sustainable development, and also it allows us to have an approach to greener the economy. So, indeed, for us, it is very important to have you between us, to show to Portuguese society that are people committed with the values of environment and sustainability. This big conference helps to prove the importance of the thing, and it is important to be connected with a network in IAIA that shows the big importance of the issue. I hope that in this conference, of course, the theme is energy future. We shall have opportunity to exchange experience, to learn from each other, and also to reflect in these challenges of impact assessment. Indeed, these tools have a lot of potential for the challenges that our society in the world perspective the way that we want to move on. I hope that this is a way to pave the way to a better world. And of course, events like this are very, very good for us, all of us, that have expectations in a better world. I hope you enjoy your conference. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, we have some changes on the program of this session. The Secretary of State on Environmental and Planning wasn't able to come, and our first guest speaker wasn't able to come either. But, well, he informed us that he has a meeting right now with the Prime Minister of Portugal, so we weren't able to make it to Porto. I'm sorry for this. I'm sure that this presentation on climate change and energy would have been very interesting. He sent us a PDF version of his presentation, and this file will be posted online as soon as possible on the IAIA website. Our first guest speaker is George Kremlis. George Kremlis is the head of the Cohesion Policy and Environmental Impact Assessment Unit of the European Commission, responsible for the compliance with environmental laws of plans, programs and projects co-financed by the European Union, as well for the evaluation of its impacts. Please, George.
Good morning, everybody. My compliments to IAIA and to the Portuguese organizers for organizing such a mega conference in this wonderful place. It is really a pleasure to be with you here today. Looking into this large audience, I was wondering whether people were attracted by the theme energy or by the theme environment, as both are extremely trendy, but as occasionally, not to say frequently, they compete amongst each other. I think that the purpose of the conference is to ensure a win-win situation between both, and this is how environmental impact assessments could, in fact, streamline the environment into the energy projects that are currently extremely important for our countries and for our planet. I represent the European Commission that represents the European Union for the non-EU participants, with its 27, soon 28 member states, who are key players in energy issues. Energy is clearly a challenge, as I said before, and of course there is now in the Lisbon Treaty, that is the last treaty amending the previous treaties that have established the European Union, a chapter, a full-fledged chapter on energy, while in the past we had the chapter on environment. Now, there are a lot of initiatives at the European Union level, not only within our own member states, but also in the broader neighboring area. Amongst them, I would refer to shale gas, that is now extremely trendy in Europe, and which was extremely successful in the United States, as the United States became the first gas producer thanks to shale gas. We are currently considering within the European Union the environmental impacts of shale gas, and soon, following a series of studies that we have been launching, we will be in the position to take a position at the European Union level on whether we need a new legal instrument on shale gas, or whether the existing legal framework on the environment, which is a very sophisticated one, is sufficient to ensure that shale gas initiatives, in particular in Poland, where we expect that shale gas is a little bit less important than what was discovered in the United States, but extremely important for this country and for the European economy. The other challenge is to reach the 20% targets on renewable sources of energy. This is one of the 3-4 targets that the European Union has set in the energy climate package. And therefore, we have to reach a 20% level in the use of renewable sources of energy, be it wind, solar, water, etc. These are extremely important as they contribute to the protection of climate, but on the other hand, they create, to some extent, frictions with pieces of European Union environmental legislation, in particular as regards the protection of habitats and birds, as wind farms can have detrimental effects on them. An additional point is that a lot of mega projects, namely gas pipelines or electricity grids that connect several countries, including third countries, are being developed. We have successfully completed the Nord Stream project, bringing gas from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea gas pipeline offshore. We are now working on the environmental assessment of Nabucco. Soon the South Stream project and other important projects will be as well initiated. The Trans-Anatolia, for example, is also under consideration. These are projects that are also very interesting for the IFIs, as a lot of IFIs and the European Union are willing to co-finance them, and therefore in the due diligence processes, the impact assessment, which is in fact a very sophisticated one, the IAIA is the umbrella under which other environmental assessments will also have to be coordinated. I will come in a while to this, but I thought it was interesting to put you in the more general context of what we are currently doing. And in that respect, the ESPO Convention, which is a UNECE convention on the transboundary impacts, becomes extremely important as this long range, this transboundary larger scale projects have to be assessed in a holistic way and not only within the boundaries of the countries which the project crosses. Therefore, the ESPO Convention, together with Article 7 of the IAIA Directive, with those that are familiar with our legal system, become extremely important. And probably an interesting information, we are currently preparing within the European Commission guidelines on large-scale projects and how such projects will be environmentally assessed, not only under the ESPO Convention, which has been ratified by the European Union, but also under all the relevant pieces of environmental legislation of the European Union that have to be coordinated and streamlined in an assessments process. The guidelines will be made public, and hopefully we will share them with the UNECE to see how they can be followed up. And they will certainly constitute a good practice for similar larger scale projects in other areas of the planet where such projects can be developed. I would like also to refer to a new initiative, namely the new IAIA directive that we are currently preparing. This is a review of the existing directive, which was amended already 4 times to take on board the requirements of the Orhus Convention inter alia. We are currently preparing the draft, and hopefully it will be adopted by the College of the Commissioners in September, and subsequently go through the Council and the European Parliament, which are our legislators in the European Union, with the view to be adopted. We will try to take on board the experiences with this directive, which is a directive since 1985, a very old one, amended several times, as I mentioned before, to take on board the case law of the European Court of Justice, but also to take on board new, let's say, experiences and new elements that have arisen, such as climate change, the energy issues, biodiversity, etc. And in that respect, we are currently preparing a guidance document on how we can take on board in the existing codified Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, which codifies the 4 pre-existing directives, pending the adoption of the new proposal, how we can take on board the climate and biodiversity considerations in the environmental report that will have to be prepared. You will have the opportunity to discuss this in the various workshops, but as said by the previous speakers, climate considerations will have now to be fully assessed within the different projects, be it the motorway, be it the nuclear plant, be it a large combustion plants, etc., biodiversity as well. And this will become a tool for the so-called climate proofing and biodiversity proofing. It's not as large as a food proofing, which has to assess the full life cycle of the project, but it is an extremely important tool to mainstream in the life cycle of the project, as we want in the new proposal to introduce also monitoring provisions, which currently do not exist in the IAIA directive, whereas they exist in the SCA directive that we have. I already mentioned that co-financing is extremely important, and what we find out is that all the IFIs, World Bank is represented by the President, other IFIs, the European Investment Bank, the EIB, etc., when they produce their appraisal, the due diligence report, they try to comply with the full body of the environmental laws and the ESCO Convention, but also with the requirements of the Aarhus Convention when it comes to public participation. And in that respect, the environmental impact assessment becomes even a larger tool, as it takes also into consideration social considerations that we are currently, for instance, discussing for the Nabucco project. Have the human rights in the upstream countries before Turkey being respected, etc., etc. These are key considerations that, of course, are not within the framework of the environmental assessment as a legal tool, but which are extremely important for a project to go ahead and be co-financed. And probably a last interesting information, working with the IFIs that have adopted the European principles for the environment, which is some kind of, let's say, common understanding on how the IFIs will assess projects, taking into consideration the key elements of environmental assessments. We are currently reviewing, and the EIB took this initiative following a proposal from the Commission to meet with the other IFIs and to review the European principles for the environment, within which, of course, the environmental impact assessment tools, be it strategic for plans and programs or project related, will be extremely important. Now, this is my presentation. I'm not going to take you through all of it, as you will certainly have the opportunity to read it more thoroughly, I would say. I was thinking, when I saw the list of participants, probably presenting a European Union-driven presentation would not be so interesting for all of you. Therefore, I tried at least to dedicate the first part of my presentation on issues of more general interest that we are currently developing within the EU and which can constitute a good practice to be followed in the other areas of the world. I'll take you very quickly through this presentation. I mean, the different infrastructure categories when we talk about energy projects are electricity, smart grids are extremely important, and of course the long-range electricity connections are extremely important. And one of the challenges we are currently having in the European Union is how we can connect the renewable sources of energy with the grid to make the connections interoperational and to benefit from areas where we have a lot of renewable sources of energy that can be through the cables, the long-range cables, be transported to other parts. Gas is extremely important, I should have added shale gas on the list. Oil is the conventional source of gas. And CO2 is important because transport pipelines for CO2 and carbon capture storage installations will be covered. And I would say that on the top of all of that, we are currently also considering how we can support projects for the storage of electricity that comes from renewable sources of energy, which can be then put into the grid. Therefore, we have not only storage of carbon under the CO2 box, but we are also considering more general schemes on how we can store electricity, in particular from renewable sources of energy. Now, the impacts of energy infrastructure projects on the environment are, as you can see, several impacts. I can tell you that in my country, Greece, in a Greek island where a developer wanted to build one single wind turbine, he didn't manage because of the visual pollution, I put this in inverted commas, and the impacts on the archaeological importance of the island as such that had to be preserved. So you can see that the different impacts, not only the purely environmental ones from electromagnetic radiation or collision damage with birds or whatever, can be taken into consideration and assessment that needs to be very complex. I agree. These are possible conflicts with protected areas, which are nation-protected areas under the Habitats and the Birds Directive of the European Union for high voltage transmission links cables between, as you see, different countries of the European Union. This is something which requires that particular full assessments under the Birds and the Habitat Directive to be carried out under the umbrella of the IAIA Directive, and as the case with the BPF Convention, have to be carried out. We have proposed a new regulation. The 10 guidelines will take the form of the regulation. It is currently under discussion in the Council and in the European Parliament. It is there to ensure secure supply and to connect and take into the grid the renewable energy needed to lower greenhouse gas emissions. So here are the costs. This is interesting only for the EU and the EU member states. You can see that we are talking about billions of euros that are at stake. The energy infrastructure guidelines will identify 12 priority corridors, which will cover all the areas that I have presented: electricity, gas, oil, carbon dioxide, transport networks. And these projects that will be defined within the 12 corridors will be considered as projects of common interest for the European Union, and therefore they will benefit from a special regime. Now here you see how the identification of these projects of common interest will take place and what will be the different criteria to be used. I'll not take you through it. One experience that we had when considering this, and especially our colleagues in the Energy Department, was that normally it would take 6 years to go through a permitting process for this type of projects. And therefore it was important to see how we can streamline the process. The reasons for taking so much time are there. Many stakeholders, social acceptance issues, different authorities, national, regional, local level, not in my backyard considerations, legal litigation, etc., etc. So the idea here is to go with a one-stop shop approach by defining a competent authority within each member state responsible for the projects of common interest, which of course will have to ensure that the project will meet all the environmental requirements. For us, this was a red line that we had to ensure is there, and which would take a decision within a specific time frame that should not exceed 3 years. So in fact, streamlining of the different assessments and a deadline to make sure that the project will be adopted within a reasonable deadline. Transparency and public participation are extremely important because we didn't want to give the impression that these are projects that will be decided by Brussels and the capital of the member state concerned. We want the people to be fully involved. And the status given to these projects would be a European status in the sense that they would be considered as projects of overriding public interest, and therefore this is a category within the legal definition of Article 6 of the Habitat Directive, that this type of projects can go ahead, provided, of course, some legal requirements are met in that respect. So here, simply to tell you that the various directives that have to be streamlined, it's not only the EIA and the SCA that are the key horizontal instruments for environmental assessments, but all the other bodies of legislation that need also to be streamlined and taken into consideration in this one-stop shop example. And I think that this is all. What is important is to make sure that projects that are extremely important for the energy supply and energy mix and the diversification of the energy sources, and in particular renewable sources of energy, can go ahead in terms of pipelines and infrastructure that needs to be built as projects of common interest for the European Union through procedures that will be better coordinated, but which will not be detrimental for the protection of the environment. Thank you very much for your attention.
The next guest speaker is Paulo Pino. Paulo is full professor of environment and territory planning on the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Porto. He is also the director of the Research Center of Territory, Transports and Environment of the same institution. Paulo.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks very much to Miguel and to Carlos in particular for this kind presentation. I'm quite pleased and honored to address such a vast and knowledgeable audience. So I'll try to stick to my time, which will be a bit difficult, at least I guess at the moment. The title of my presentation, as you can see, environmental assessment and the changing nature of societal challenges. Actually, I think it encapsulates my main concern. And my idea with this presentation is really to develop a bit this concern, and also towards the end of the presentation to present a kind of a small proposal or a modest proposal to solve part of these concerns. Well, we all know that environmental assessment, and in this presentation by environmental assessment, I include EIA and SCA at least. Environmental assessment is with us for the last 40 years. And over these last 40 years, the world changed a lot. And so did EIA, actually. But my question is, was it enough? I have some doubts, and I want to share with you. Well, you all know that over these last 40 years, EIA evolved into a kind of wide umbrella, including a wide range of impact assessment tools. When we look at the literature, there are 3 or 4 aspects that come out as worries for practitioners and for researchers. One of these worries is the concern on integration. We believe that if EA is able to integrate into the development planning process, it will be more effective. The other concern is that EA is not seen simply as a kind of a support tool to decision making, but actually as a more ambitious role to really influence decision-making processes. And this is emphasized by quite a number of people. The other thing is, in the last couple of years, I'd say last 10, 15 years, there was considerable effort to build a coherent body of knowledge, a kind of a theoretical framework to make this activity more consistent. So, well, I have to say that from time to time we see a kind of warming or importing, this kind of debates and narratives from other fields, but I think that is normal in this field and in many other fields that occurs. About EA, there is, I would say, a consensual position in the sense that EA is seen for the vast majority of people as a policy instrument. But okay, policy instrument has two words, policy and instrument. And what I see is that quite an emphasis on the instrument component and not so much in the policy component. And in that respect, we seem to miss the point that as a policy instrument is something to deliver policies. So when it comes to effectiveness, we have to be in mind or to have in mind what are the policies that this policy instrument is supposed to deliver. Okay, at the same time, we have a changing world, and we are now really in uncertain times, I would say. Globalization is hitting us in this corner of the world like a boomerang. We have new perceptions of time and space. And one of the strange things about this is that with all this acceleration of time, we are losing the long term. I would say the long term, our long-term perspectives are under threat. Most of us and most of our governments, to be frank with you, I think they don't know exactly what to do next week or next month. Not to think of in 5 or 10 years' time. This is really a difficult time, but it's also a challenging time. The world is made of many worlds. They are all in transition. But I have to stress this idea that, to me, it's better than ever before, although we are facing here quite a severe crisis. We have changing demographies, we have aging, we have significant changes in lifestyles. We were educated to plan for growth, and at the moment we have to think also plan for shrinkage, because actually most of our cities, especially in this part of the world, are shrinking, and they will keep shrinking. So that's a fact of life. So many paradigms are changing. The other thing is the changing geographies of production and of consumption that is generating a changing nature of environmental threats. Finally, we have the climate change debate, and we have what I can call a kind of a rise and probably fall of the sustainability concept that we all like it very much, but oftentimes we don't know exactly what to do with it. At least that's my modest impression. So I think we have to start looking for more convincing paradigms. And why not low-carbon cities or low-carbon societies? Okay, the other and final point in this slide is this idea that urban context is becoming more and more important, because most of environmental threats are generated and may well be solved within the context of our cities and of our metropolis. Okay, if perhaps some of you may well know this graph, it's very easy to to make it. I've done it myself very easily using the internet. So if you plot the Human Development Index of the United Nations against the ecological footprint that is available for a number of countries, this is what you get. Each dot is a country. If you try to figure out what kind of curve adjusts to this number of spots, that's what you see. And it's a bit frightening, actually, because it seems that if you are on the high human development corner of the world, you are really well above the world ecological footprint in terms of average. That brings me to another discussion about what's really is sustainable development. If we plot now here a macro indicator of environmental impact and a macro indicator of economic activity, that point P is where we stand now. If we are able, and business as usual trend follows that line over there. If we apply all the technologies we have, they will have a positive impact obviously. It's this techno scenario. But still, we are really quite far away from what we consider sustainable development. That is, the real decoupling of economic growth from environmental impact. And this seems almost an impossible scenario to go for. Anyway, in this context, I have to say that environmental assessment is facing a number of challenges. First, because when it comes to energy and natural resources, the question now is not really to produce environmental friendly energy and natural resources, but actually, or use natural resources, but actually to reduce the consumption of energy and to reduce the consumption of certain types of food, to reduce the use of transport, moving from the mobility paradigm to the accessibility paradigm. These are the big changes, challenges that we have had. In this respect, we have to emphasize a kind of a benchmarking approach if we don't want to be trapped in the discussions about sustainable development. So we need more operational approaches, fixing targets and measuring progress. We have to move from a kind of a compliance-oriented EA, and this word is not mine, I read it somewhere, to a performance-oriented EA. Taking into account both sides of the equation in terms of environmental threats, that is the production system and the consumption system. In some parts of the world, the production is still the major concern in terms of the environment. In other parts of the world, we as consumers are the major concern. So we have, coming back to these environmental hotspots, coming back to our cities and metropolis, we have to be more comprehensive in dealing with these particular settings, exploring urban modeling and urban metabolism. And I'll come back to this point later. So, let me bring you here, since you are in Oporto, some evidence of these concerns I have. And I bring you here an example of a project that was funded by our Regional Coordination Commission, and where the idea was to assess the development in the last 20 years in this northern region, including environmental, social, and economic aspects. And we were suggested to use a rather rich archive of all the EIAs that had been produced in the last 20 years. And there were hundreds of EIAs. And so our base was the analysis of those EIA reports. And what did come out? I'm not going to talk about the main conclusions of that study because they are not within the remit of this conference. But what worried me most was that unexpectedly, and we were really surprised, most of the investment was not triggered by the IAIA system, was not filtered by the IAIA system in the last 20 years. And, funny enough, there was no evidence to suggest a failure in the screening process or in the overall enforcement of the EIA. The other thing, most of the regional environmental issues, the things that are really important in this part of the country, like coastal zones or the forest areas, they were hardly touched by the EIA reports that we've seen. And again, no evidence suggesting an obvious failure in the current EIA practice. So, the conclusion is that it seems that the EIA system is not really capturing what is really important in terms of investment. And why? Because over these last 3 years, we were moving from rural production and infrastructure sectors investment towards a more urban service and consumption sectors investment. So there was a change in the nature of investment, and that change was not captured by the EIA system. Okay, I talked to you before that one of my main concerns has to do also with the fact that most of the environmental conflicts occur increasingly in our cities and metropolis. And so what I've seen, particularly in this country, but also in some other countries, most of the IAs were not really able to respond to the particular nature of the problem, of the environmental problems in a city or in a metropolis. So, within a European project, we started to develop a kind of what we call later a metabolic impact assessment methodology to use this old concept of urban metabolism and try to see to what extent it could be useful to assess urban projects within urban settings. You all know that what is human metabolism? No, it has to do with the energy and the food that we take, the way we process, and obviously in the end we generate waste. This metabolism can be more or less efficient. In cities, it's exactly the same. We may well have cities that are more efficient from a metabolic point of view, in the sense that for a given standard of quality of life, urban quality of life, and quality of the urban environment, they need less energy and less resources. And obviously, if that is the case, we will produce less wastes. So this idea of efficiency is very important, but it has to do with the particular way that a city works. So we came out with this metabolic impact assessment, I would say methodology. Basically, it is an instrument to assess the overall impact of a particular development proposal in the existing urban metabolism performance of a given city, a metropolis, or a city region. The main objectives are, first of all, to evaluate the urban development process. MIA focuses on plans and projects as main drivers of change. It assesses the citywide metabolic impacts of proposals and not simply the direct or indirect impacts. It explores the spatial dimension of alternative development processes. It addresses different temporal scales, although it's better suited to the short and medium term. And it deals in an integrated way with the environmental system and social system, because the concept of metabolism encapsulates these two systems. The MIA process basically follows a structure that is very much similar with the traditional EIA approach. I don't have time to go into detail into these things, but you have there a reference that you can look at if you are more interested, or if you are interested in knowing a bit further what we are doing. And I'll just bring you here, I don't have time, I know, so I'll just bring you here some documents from an application of this MIA concept. And this application, because you are in Oporto, is of an urban development project in Oporto. It was a big project, and through urban metabolism, we were able to assess different locations for this major urban development project. And we came out with three possibilities. Assessing how the urban metabolism of the city works, and these are some maps of our material that we had to produce to build the urban metabolism model for the city. We came out to the conclusion that this same project, located in very different places in the city, generate quite different impacts, not direct or indirect impacts, but impacts in all the city. And this is something that for most of you have already come across. I mean, sometimes, either in terms of when we are consultants or when we are researchers, we came about with very interesting projects in paper that look fantastic. But once plugged into a city or a region, they may all be a disaster. On the contrary, too often we also find projects that may not be that interesting, but if they are located in the right place, their impacts may well even offset and actually may well even improve the overall performance of the city or of the region. And this is the question that this MIA concept tries to address. Also, this MIA concept, because it is able to include the production and consumption aspects of our societies, in our view, it may well contribute to a better understanding of the real impacts of urban development projects in our cities and city regions. Okay, so to finish, just two simple conclusions. The first one is to sustain its central position within the wider range of environmental policy instruments. Environmental assessment needs, first of all, to be responsive to the different nature and the different development stages and patterns in different parts of the world. Secondly, needs to adapt to new emerging societal challenges, to new lifestyles, to new modes of production and consumption that in practice are increasingly responsible for different nature of environmental threats and pressures in this world. Second conclusion, to strengthen its contribution to the energy debate, environmental assessment needs to take into consideration the specificities of the urban context, because the majority of conflicts, as I said before, are within the urban context. To adopt a performance-based approach in line with low-carbon cities strategy and explore new methodologies, and I provide you an example, mere concept, to address the efficiency of the urban metabolism of our cities and metropolis. Thank you very much.
Now please join me in congratulating the winners of the 2012 IAIA Awards. Please hold your applause until the end. The Global Environment Award has been awarded to the International Network for Environmental Compliance and Enforcement. The award will be accepted by Gunnar Baldwin. IAIA's Rose Holman Award will be awarded to Peter Crow of Canada. And two initiatives will be recognized this year for IAIA's new Corporate Initiative Award. The first is the International Center for Environmental Management Strategic Environmental Assessment Work, and the award will be accepted by Jeremy Carrier-Reed. And the second is Anglo-American Socioeconomic Assessment Tool. Accepting will be Jonathan Samuel. IAIA Institutional Award will be awarded to the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment of the United Kingdom. Accepted will be Josh Fothergill. And the Regional Award will be given to Portugal's Redes Energéticas Nacionais, REN. Accepting will be Rui Cartacho. The individual award will be awarded to Joint Boyle of Canada, and the Outstanding Service to IAIA Award will be given to Júlio Jesus of Portugal. Awards will be presented throughout the conference, but for now, I wish all delegates to be able to identify the awards recipients and offer congratulations and conversation during the interim days. A round of applause to the award winners. And now, dear Stefan, President of IAIA, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to look out in this magnificent building and see it filled with IAIA delegates. We've got over 900 participants in this meeting. We originally thought they were from 94 countries. It's been corrected, it's already up to 96. So with some luck, we might even reach 100 countries being represented. This is by far the largest meeting we've had in a number of years, and it has, without question, the greatest diversity of countries represented. So I think Porto has proven to be an excellent location. And I'd like to thank Miguel, who served as the chair of the local organizing committee and the co-chair of the program committee, as well as Carlos, who also served as the co-chair of the program committee, and their entire team for an absolutely outstanding work program that went into putting this program together, as you can see now. I'd also like to thank our hosts, IDAD and the Portuguese Association for Impact Assessment, for making this all possible. If you look at the back of your program, you'll see something that's also quite enviable. You will see that we have a wide range of public and private sector sponsors. Look at the back of that program. Again, this reflects the excellent planning, but also the broad support and interest we have in Portugal and beyond in having IAIA meetings, where we do have private sector interest, companies, consultancies, as well as governmental interest at the national and subnational level, all being willing to serve as sponsors. I think this also is a case where we have great range of sponsors, and I think this is really good. You'll also see that we've got media partners who've actually helped make this conference well known, and beyond the conference will continue to pass messages out, particularly here in Portugal. I'd also like to thank Australian Aid, widely known as AUSAID, for supporting over 70 delegates from the Africa region. It's incredible to have so many African countries represented, and people, again, from the public sector, from the private sector, non-governmental people, all here to benefit from the networking within the IAIA community, but also to benefit from the Pan-African networking that this provides. I'd also like to note that we have two major development organizations, JICA of Japan and NORAD of Norway, providing support. I'd like to very much also thank the support we're receiving from Taylor & Francis, which is the new publisher of our journal, IAPA, and also the excellent work of the team that was led by Frank Van Clegg in reaching the selection of Taylor & Francis. They put in a huge amount of work in a competitive process of selection. And of course, without any question, the IAIA Secretariat, based in Fargo, North Dakota, which is a very interesting place. North Dakota has the lowest unemployment rate in the United States right now. So I think for those, whether you're in the US or whether in Europe with very high unemployment rates, North Dakota is the place to go, with a major energy boom. So you don't have to worry about people in our Secretariat freezing next year. There's plenty of energy. With regard to our theme, quite clearly energy future, the role of impact assessment has proven to be of extremely broad interest. And I think the initial presentations we had were really important. We talked about environmental assessment practice here in Portugal. We talked about some of the real dilemmas facing the European Commission and the European community more broadly, and how do we basically create these very important energy links to improve efficiency, to increase flexibility, to basically allow for a more diverse range of energy sources to be shared with each other. But of course, then the question is environmental assessment supporting this, or is environmental assessment hindering it? And I think as we see the evolution of the work that the Commission is doing, there'll be ideas that will be certainly looked at by the multilateral development banks where I work, the World Bank, or many of the countries here who have exactly the same problems outside of Europe. How do you actually provide for access? I think one of the things I also enjoyed in Professor Pino's presentation was the fact that he talked about this whole idea of this metabolic urban environment. It was particularly gratifying to me because this urban metabolism idea that he was working with and had taken from an urban concept into this proposal to start considering MIA, metabolic impact assessment, was an idea developed by one of my late professors, Abel Wollman, in 1965. Professor Wollman actually developed that looking at Baltimore, but he also spent a large amount of his life working on Brazilian cities, particularly São Paulo, and dealing with urban water supply. So you can have very different entry points that you come up with in this area. But I think what's really important is both those presentations by the representative of the Commission and the last presentation talking about the metabolic impact assessment approach captured the concern that we have to be ready to change. We've got to be ready to change the way we look at things, the way we do things, and I think that's very important. EIA is not cast in stone. Impact assessment is something that's dynamic, evolving, and needs to be adapted to changing times and circumstances. With regard to that, I would like to say clearly the world economy is very dynamic. We've got some very, very complex issues occurring all over: economic slowdown, unemployment, a lack of predictability. But I want to report that the state of IAIA is great right now. We've got a good, solid budget. Doesn't mean it's permanently going to be that way. We're always looking for donors. We're always looking for a way to create a capital fund for the institution. Our membership is stable, and we would like to keep it growing. There have been some important developments this year. One is IAIA Connect is fully operational. Those who are members will have the opportunity to continue to get that service. I think the team at the headquarters is doing a great job getting that put together. We're in the process now of rolling out fast tips, and Maria Partidario has been taking the lead on that. We're really quite pleased with her efforts. The third fast tip will be issued soon. And I would like to report that the planning for IAIA 2013 is progressing rapidly. So we'll have some announcements later on in the program this week concerning that. What I would like to do, and this builds on some of the comments that Miguel made at the beginning, this is a very large conference. It's rich. There are many different things to look at. There are many different sessions to go to. There's a lot of opportunity for formal and informal interaction. I would encourage people, beyond looking at the front and back of your program, to open it up and to really cast your eye on what opportunities are there and plan your week well so you get maximum benefit out of this. I think also I'd like to encourage people. We have a people's choice process for the posters. I think everyone should go look at the posters. People put in a lot of work. It's a format that we in this organization do not use enough. Many other professional societies use it more extensively. So I'd ask people to go look at the posters and do your people's choice balloting. We're an organization that talks about public participation as a keystone. This is our opportunity to weigh in. You also need to consider who you'd like to nominate for IAIA Awards in 2013. You just heard the list of individual awardees and also institutional awardees. People are doing outstanding work out there. Institutions in the public and private sector are doing outstanding work. It is an honor and a responsibility of this organization to recognize these people, to recognize these institutions, public and private, so that others can be aware of excellence and innovation. Lastly, although we're at the beginning of the meeting here in Porto, IAIA 2012, please start planning to participate in IAIA 2013. You're going to get all kinds of ideas for papers you might want to proceed with preparing. You've got ideas for posters, you've got ideas for sessions. Please start to think about that. This is your opportunity to identify co-chairs if you want to organize sessions. So please participate in the meeting, but also look to the future. Thank you very much.